Sio nigad, sio Nico dawadoa, tigarasta yahaski alena nekia, ulisdaidi degareshkwa. So my name is Nico Albert Williams, and I'm pleased to be here today. Thank you for your patience with me getting set up here today. It's an honor to be here and be able to share some stories with you and share a recipe that hopefully you guys will be able to make at home this fall. So just to let you know a little bit about myself, of course, I'm a Cherokee Nation citizen. I live in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I own a company called Burning Cedar Indigenous Foods, and we specialize in traditional and modern Native American cuisine. So we do a lot of catering and consulting and teaching about what traditional Native food is and what modern Native food is. And my favorite thing to do is to take our traditional ancestral ingredients and create modern dishes out of it that are, more accessible for people, so that we can bring those healthy traditional foods into our diets and into our homes on a daily basis. And so another really important part for me about traditional food is the tie that it has to our culture through stories. And so today I'd like to share with you one of my favorite Cherokee stories that teaches us the origin of plant medicine. So the story starts the way that a lot of our Cherokee stories start, a long, long time ago when the earth was very brand new. And when the earth was new, all of the animals and the plants and the people all lived together, and they all spoke the same language. And during this time, we lived in a state of what we call tohi. And you might recognize the root of that word a little bit. We use it in a lot of different words in the Cherokee language. And as I learn the Cherokee language, I love finding these little bits that teach us so much about who we are as a people in our language. Tohi, you can recognize when we speak to each other, we say, when we see each other on the street, we say, "Osio, tohichu." And that kind of translates into English as "how are you?" But for Cherokee people, it's so much more than just "how are you?" What we're really asking is, are you in balance with everything in the world around you? Are you in a good relationship with everything in the world around you? How are you relating to the plants and the animals and the trees and the water and the land? That's what we mean when we say tohichu. So in this time, at the very beginning of time, everything was in good relationship with one another. And we lived that way for a very long time. And as sometimes happens, people started to forget about that balance and forget about their place in the balance of things, and started to feel like maybe they were more important than the animals and the plants. And what started happening was the people were taking liberties. They were hunting for sport. They were taking animals and using them for, adorning themselves and not using the meat, or they were leaving the meat to spoil. They were taking more than they were asking for. And this was upsetting the balance of our existence. And the animals in particular took great offense to this. And so they called their council, and in this council, the deer were one of the most vocal opponents of the situation that they were in. And they said, something has to be done about these people. They are dwindling our numbers with the amount of us that they're hunting. They've forgotten their place. They've forgotten to ask permission. They've forgotten to give thanks for this gift that we've given them. And so they went to Creator and said, Creator, there's got to be something we can do to restore this balance. And so in that moment, Creator brought upon the people all of these different afflictions. Now, before this time, humans had never had so much as a headache or a cold, but what Creator did was send all of these ailments down to afflict the humans and reset that balance. And so all of a sudden, these illnesses came into the world that humans had never had to deal with before. We had things as simple as a headache or a cold, but things as difficult and bad as cancers and heart disease and all of these things that started afflicting the humans, and there was nothing to be done for it. People were suffering, people were dying, and all of a sudden the humans' numbers were dwindling. The animals felt a little better about that because they could sleep a little better at night knowing that their families were going to survive and thrive, but it still wasn't balance. It wasn't tohi. there was still a shift where things were not in balance. And so the plants saw this. Plants are the ones that we kind of see as our teachers. They're very quiet. They kind of sit around and they see everything. They observe everything that's going on in the world. And in that way, they gather all of the knowledge and they have compassion. And so in this compassionate way, the plants decided, this isn't in balance either, and there's got to be something that we can do to help the humans and remind them of their place. And so the plants went to Creator and said, what can we do to help these humans and to restore this balance and tohi? And so the Creator gave a gift to the plants, the gift of medicine. So each and every plant was gifted with the ability to heal something that was ailing and afflicting the humans. But there was a caveat to this. The plants weren't just going to give these gifts freely. The humans had to know how to ask for these gifts. And what I mean by ask is we had to be in good relationship with the plants to receive that gift of medicine. When we talk about relationships with plants, I want you to think about the relationship that you have with someone in your life that you love very much. Your brother, your sister, your mother, one of your good friends. When you have a relationship with those people, you know things about them. You know the things that they like to eat. You know whether they prefer to be hot or cold. You know where their favorite place to hang out is. You know who their friends are, right? Those are all things that humans had to relearn. We had to discover and build a relationship with plants and learn what they liked, what they needed to be happy and to thrive. And once we learned and built that relationship where we really had a close relationship with plants, they were able to give us the gift of what they could do for us to heal us. And so in that way, all of these plants give us these gifts of medicine and support our healthy immune systems, and they heal things that ail us if we know how to ask. And so in that way, Tohi was reestablished and everything went back to that balance. And I think we can all agree that right now we are not in that balance with our plant relatives anymore. Some of us know some things about some different plants. I'm in that same boat myself. I know some things about some different plants, but I don't have a relationship with every plant out there. I think it'll take my lifetime to learn all of those plants that I want to be in relationship with. But that's what we talk about when we talk about food being healing, food being medicine, and re-establishing and reconnecting our relationship with plants and with the natural world. And that's part of what food sovereignty is about, is reestablishing our relationship so that we can receive the gifts that the plants give us. So when we talk about gifts, that's something that needs to be delved a little bit more into, right? We think of gifts as, just something that you receive, but a gift is also a responsibility. And we have a responsibility as the plants give us gifts, or as the animals give us gifts to support our bodies and our families. We have a responsibility to take care of them in turn. And that's the reciprocal relationship. It's a back and forth relationship. And I think that's the way that we heal our own selves and that we heal our earth, is by reestablishing that relationship that we used to have, that our ancestors had, the gift relationship. If you think about, I have an analogy that I like to use. It's my scarf analogy, right? If you go to Target or Walmart and you buy a scarf and, it's, $5 or $10, and you like that scarf, but if you leave that scarf on the bus or you forget it, outside on the patio and it gets rained on and it gets ruined, it's kind of no big deal. You're just going to go to Target and get another scarf. But if your grandmother or your good friend knits you a scarf, you take really good care of that scarf. You make sure you know where that scarf is at all times. You make sure that you take care of it and you know where it is, and one day maybe you'll gift that scarf to someone else and they'll take care of that scarf. That's the way I think about the plants and the animals in our natural world. These were gifts that were given to us by Creator. And we have a responsibility to take care of those gifts. Because it's a gift, that's a relationship and that's a responsibility that we have. And when we put that importance on the ingredients that we use in our food and the land that we share with the animals and the plants, it changes the way that we operate in our daily lives. And it takes us back to the way that our ancestors lived. And it's a more traditional and a more Cherokee way of thinking when we think about everything that we use in the world as a gift. So with that story in mind, I'd like to teach you guys a quick recipe that I really like to make in the fall time when we have harvested some squash. Now, this is winter squash. I'm going to be using an acorn squash today. And what we're going to do is make a pumpkin vinaigrette. Now, I'm saying pumpkin. I'm using the word pumpkin very loosely because pumpkins are winter squash, and you can use this interchangeably with any kind of squash, winter squash, that you happen to have available. So today I have acorn squash. I like making this with butternut squash. My favorite is the Cherokee tan pumpkin. Now, it's a little early in the season for that right now, so I'm using these squash from the grocery store, but the best way to make this is with those squash that hopefully you're growing from the Cherokee Nation seed bank, where we've saved all of those seeds, like the Georgia Candy Roaster or the Cherokee Tan Pumpkin that we've just brought back. And those make a great vinaigrette too. And the fun thing about this is we're going to use the flesh of this squash to flavor our vinaigrette, and then we're also going to cut this up and make the salad itself. So we're kind of dressing this little squash with its own self. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a small batch of this. We're going to use about a half a cup of the squash, and I'm just going to kind of scoop it out. To roast these, what I did was I just put them on like a cookie sheet, set my oven to 400 degrees. I cut each squash in half and scooped all the seeds out, and then I put them, I'm going to use this one, put them kind of cut side down on the cookie sheet, roasted it for about 30 minutes until they were nice and tender. And you can see there's a little bit of browning going on, caramelization. That's good to add some extra flavor. So I'm just going to scoop about a half a cup of this in here. In a pinch, you could make this with canned pumpkin, but the flavor of fresh roasted pumpkin, it's so easy to roast squash in your oven, and the flavor is so much better, and the nutrients is better for you than using the canned squash. And I don't know if any of you got to see Melissa Lewis, Dr. Lewis's presentation this morning, but she talked a lot about the nutrition benefits of using our produce that's grown from ancestral seeds. There's been studies shown that, and she had wonderful graphs, so I highly suggest if you missed that this morning, go back and look at the live stream. But she had these graphs where it shows that the nutritional content of plants grown from our ancestral seeds, from those heirloom seeds, is much higher than the stuff that you get at the grocery store, even the organic stuff, because the mass farming of ingredients will really kind of deplete the nutrients. And so the things that you buy at the store don't have that really concentrated nutrient source. Now, I've got about a half a cup of pumpkin vinegar, or of the roasted pumpkin, and then I'm going to do about 2 tablespoons of maple syrup. I like to add just a little bit of sweetness to this vinaigrette because it really complements the pumpkin, and then it balances out the greens that we're going to use. A lot of people really struggle with getting enough greens in their diet, and part of that is because we've sort of evolved to not enjoy that bitterness. Some people really have a trouble with that bitterness that these green vegetables have. I personally love that bitterness, but it's good to balance it out, and adding a little bit of sweetness to your vinaigrettes is a great way to do that. Maple syrup is an excellent way to do that, especially this kind. This is from the Passamaquoddy tribe up in northern Maine, and we know that they're excellent stewards of the land because they have a relationship with their maple trees. They've come up with their maple trees for generations, so they take care of them, and the trees provide this maple syrup for them. and I like to support them by buying it from them. The little bit of sweetness added there balances out the bitterness in your greens, and it makes it a lot more palatable for people that are trying to work those greens into your diet and aren't quite there yet as far as craving those vegetables. The next thing I'm going to add is a little bit of chipotle powder. This adds a little bit of a kick to the dressing. I really, really love adding chili with anything that I do with squash. They really pair well together. So I'm just going to put about a teaspoon in there. And then I'm going to add some salt, just about 2 teaspoons of kosher salt. And I like to have a really good repertoire of vinaigrettes for my kitchen, and that's because they're excellent sauces that are low in fat, high in vitamins, because you can add all of these extra ingredients and, you know, use different ingredients and kind of change it up for the seasons. And it's a great way to incorporate those vegetables in your diet and add that health factor to it, but also it's so important to make your vinaigrettes at home, because a lot of times you look at the vinaigrettes that you see on the shelf, they're so full. Most of them, second ingredient is going to be sugar, almost all the time. They're packed full of sugar, refined sugar especially. And then they're also full of preservatives. And that's why they get to sit on that shelf, you know, bottled up and room temperature for years and years and years. And there's always so many ingredients in them. You can make a good vinaigrette with really just oil, vinegar, and a little salt and pepper. So it's important to have that skill to be able to make your own vinaigrettes and bypass all of those preservatives that, you know, kind of junk up in our bodies, and we don't need any of that. And it's so easy to make, and this is going to last at least 2 weeks in the refrigerator, so you don't have to worry about making it for a while. The next ingredient I'm going to add is a little bit of mustard. I like to use a nice whole grain mustard. It's got some really good flavor in there, and that just adds another little punch to the vinaigrette. I'm going to do about 2 teaspoons in there. And this is a recipe that I will be posting on my website very shortly, so as soon as we're done here, you'll be able to check that out and be able to access it for later. The next thing I'm going to do is, now my recipe says 2 cloves of garlic. I don't know if you guys are like me. Anytime I see a recipe that says 2 cloves of garlic, to me that means like 6 to 8 cloves of garlic. The fun part about making your own food is if you're not a garlic person, you could leave it out altogether. You could put 1 clove. This is like 4. So we'll do that. And then the next thing I'm going to do is some fresh sage. Sage is another one of those kind of fall time herbs. It reminds me of stuffing at Thanksgiving. It's got that aroma that reminds me of ceremony too, because this is one of those, this is culinary sage, but we do use sage as a medicine for blessings. So it's got that relationship as well. And I'm just going to put all of this in there. It's about 2 tablespoons worth, more or less. I'm just picking off the little tough ends and using the leaves. And then the vinegar I'm going to use is an organic apple cider vinegar. I like the kind that's really cloudy. It's got the good stuff in it. And we're going to add about a 1/2 cup of that. There we go. Maybe a splash more. And I'm just going to go ahead and blend this up until it's completely smooth, no big bits. Well, I'm going to try. I might not be plugged in. Let's see. I should have brought my mortar and pestle and gone like real tradish and showed you the elbow grease way to do this, but I'm cheating and it's gonna bite me. Do we know if we've got, is he checking power? Okay. While we wait for that to get fixed, I'm going to talk about, this is the oil that I'm going to be using to make this vinaigrette. Basically, the ratio I use with my vinaigrettes is about 1 part of vinegar to 2 parts oil. So with this recipe, I'm going to do about a cup of the avocado oil. I use avocado oil because it's a sustainable oil. There's some conflicting information about whether these saturated fats, unsaturated fats are good or bad for you. The fact of the matter is we need fats in our diet. This is a fat that's going to be nice and clean. It's made from avocado pits, so you're not going to be, it's kind of made from a byproduct that would naturally be thrown away. So that's a good thing for the environment as well. So I'm going to use that avocado oil. And then we're going to be using some fresh greens. Now, when we talk about the relationship that we have with the natural world, I'm on this journey to learn and build my relationship and kind of get to know all of these plants around us. I'm kind of looking down here. I can see a few different things that I could probably throw in this salad mix for us today. Things like sorrel, which has a really bright lemony flavor, or things like dandelion that has that bitterness that's sometimes hard to get used to. Right now, all of the dandelion that you're going to find is going to be super bitter because it's toward the end of the season. But during the spring, when you get those really nice tender leaves, those are going to be a little sweeter. How are we doing? Still no? Oh.
There's power to it. If it's not working, blender went out.
Oh no. All right, well, we're going to improvise. I think I'm going to make my own mortar and pestle here. This will be interesting. Watch me do this the old school way. Luckily, I brought a knife.
Can I ask a question? What did that?
Yeah.
Cherokee tan pumpkin is pretty sweet itself. You still need to make the syrup.
You could try, the Cherokee tan pumpkins are almost like pumpkin pie on their own, The acorn squash definitely needs the maple for sweetness, but if a lot of times I'll cut into those Cherokee tan pumpkins and they smell just like a fresh watermelon. They're so sweet. And in that way, I would say you could probably omit that maple syrup. Or you could also use, if you have a honey or something like that, you could do just a little dash of it. And that's the kind of thing where if you're doing your vinaigrette and you make it and you find, oh, maybe my pumpkin wasn't as sweet as I thought, just add a little bit after the fact and you'll be fine. Okay, so watch this mortar and pestle right now. Here, what am I going to use? This is going to be and I'm just going to smash it up. This is definitely, I wish I had a whisk. We're not going to have a very emulsified dressing or even a bottle. Let's see, I'm kind of thinking about what tools I might have at my disposal here. We'll be all right using it with a spoon. There we go. So there are great programs with the Cherokee Nation where we're doing a lot to teach people the different plants that you can identify out, even in your yard that you can use to kind of boost the nutrition on a lot of the plants that we have at our disposal. So when we're using a salad mix like this, this is a great nutritional salad mix that you can get, at any grocery store. It's got a lot of red leaf, some oak leaf, some spinach in there, all high in iron, high in vitamin A, great for you. But when you want to add a little bit of extra seasonal vitamin content, you can do that by adding things from the natural world and from foraging. And the important thing about foraging is the things that are available seasonally are the things that our body needs in that moment, in that season. So the way our ancestors lived, they lived along with the seasons, completely immersed in nature, right? So you think about the springtime. We've all been cooped up. We're eating a lot of preserved foods, when, over the winter, you're not having a lot of fresh foods. So the salts and the smoke and the things that we do to preserve our foods over the winter, those build up in our system, and we need to flush out our systems. We need to flush our kidneys, flush our liver. We need diuretics to do that. All of the plants that come up very first in the spring, the ones that we know best, like the wild onions, those have those properties that perform the flush for our bodies and clean everything out so that our bodies are ready to receive the rest of the nutrients that come with us in the early summer and throughout when we have that fresh season for our vegetables. And then once we get toward, cold and flu season, when it starts to turn colder, we're spending more time indoors. That's when nature gives us exactly what we need at that time. We get a lot of things that are high in antioxidants and have a lot of immune boosting properties. Specifically, right around now, we're getting a lot of the sumac ripening. Here in a couple months, we're going to have persimmons ripening on the trees. The things that those plants provide for us are exactly what we need at that exact time of year. They ripen right when we need lots and lots of vitamin C because we're going to be in close contact with one another, and we need that immune boosting property to get us through cold and flu season. So that's the amazing thing about having this relationship with plants, is that they give you exactly what you need right when you need it. So I think I've mashed this up with my human food processor pretty good here. I'm going to use my spoon. And so this process is called emulsifying. Usually you'll get like a nice smooth dressing, and I'll tell you a whisk would be really great right about now. Does anyone have a whisk in their purse? No? Okay. We're going to do it with a spoon, and it's going to be a pretty broken dressing. When the oil separates from the vinegar? That's what we're going to have. It's still going to taste delicious. One way that I do vinaigrettes when I do them at home, if I'm doing a really simple one that only has a couple ingredients, like say, just a little bit of maple, mustard, salt, pepper, oil, vinegar, you can shake them up in a jar, and that agitation will give you a smooth dressing. I don't have a jar, so I'm going to stir it like this. Again, we'll get the same flavor, but we're just going to add the oil a little bit at a time, and I just want about a cup, and I think we're about there. And I'm going to give it a little taste, see if we need any salt or pepper. So this is going to make about a quart of dressing. So this will last you, at least a whole week, unless you're feeding a ton of people. And this dressing, like I said, lasts for a long time in the refrigerator because the oil and vinegar kind of preserve everything. Perfect. All right. So to assemble our salad, what I'm going to do is dice up some of this squash. Depending on the type of squash that you have, you can either peel the skin off or leave it on. The skin has tons and tons of fiber, so it's really good for you. Our ancestors didn't have vegetable peelers. They didn't peel their carrots or their potatoes or anything like that. All of the fiber is in that part, so think about that. Little changes that you can make in your diet to incorporate more vitamins and nutrients. Just don't peel them. If you're using something like a butternut squash or different types of pumpkin, even the Cherokee tan pumpkin, they have a much tougher skin, which is great for allowing them to survive, and last longer on the shelf for us. They kind of preserve themselves, but it's not as great to eat. So those I would consider peeling. But for this acorn squash, I like the little bit of flavor, texture, and extra nutrients that having the skin on gives it. And I'm just doing a really simple salad with just a couple ingredients, and all of the flavors that come together in the dressing are going to make it much more interesting and exciting than you would really think. Dice these up. And one of the other things we're going to add to this is another fall favorite of mine, which is nuts. I've got some pecans right here. These are some Oklahoma native pecans. And here in a month or so, it's going to be perfect time for gathering our hickory nuts, which are a really important traditional food. We'll be gathering pecans. Hazelnuts are another traditional nut that's native to North America. I'm just going to do a little mix here. Got our mixed greens, and I'm going to spoon a little bit of this dressing over the salad. So this will be a perfect one to make for fall when we've got like that sage flavor. The pumpkins are going to be ripening, and we'll have that at our disposal. Lots of hearty greens. Kale and Swiss chard are also really good greens for your garden that'll be ripening, or that are good, fall and winter green crops. There's also, this is kind of a salad that you can really adapt for the seasons. So when we get toward later in the winter, when we've got things like persimmons, you could swap out the pumpkin for persimmon in this recipe. You definitely wouldn't need the maple or the honey to sweeten that up, because the persimmons have a ton of sweetness on their own. But basically, it's a good ratio to use, and you can take whatever you've got seasonally available and just add it in. I'm going to add some sunflower seeds and pumpkin seeds. Again, Melissa this morning talked about the three sisters. That's a staple in our ancestral ways of farming and relating to our species that have been supporting our people for so long. Sunflower seeds are that fourth sister that people don't talk about as much. The sunflowers are planted with pumpkins and, any kind of squash and beans and corn, and they kind of serve as the guardian or the sentinel. You plant the sunflowers along the edges of your garden, and they kind of distract the birds and things so that they keep your corn and your beans safe. So I'm adding tons of those, and then we've got some pumpkin seeds in here too. Seeds were a huge part of our ancestors' diets, and they have a lot of protein, fiber, all kinds of nutrients that we don't get everywhere. Another thing Dr. Lewis talked about this morning that is something that we don't think about a lot is nowadays we have a much lower variety of foods that we eat. We've got maybe somewhere between 15 to 30 different foods. If you think about the variety of where you're getting your calories, your nutrients, your vitamins and minerals from. Back in the day, our ancestors had something like 300 different plants and animals and, different places that they were getting their nutrients. So that's what we're trying to do by introducing a lot of these different foods, introducing different kinds of squash. Every different squash has a different type of nutrients it's going to be providing for you. Mixing it up so that you're not just eating one kind of thing all the time is a way to really boost your immune system and add more nutrients into your body. So I'm just going to mix this all up a little bit. And that's our fall salad. And you can see you can make it pretty easily without a lot of equipment, obviously, in a pinch. You've got a great way to flavor some greens and get all of this beautiful nutrients, and eating with the seasons is a way to stay connected and feel the way that the seasons change. That's the important thing, is to build that relationship with the world around you, to think and eat seasonally so that you know what's coming, you know what's going to be popping up in your farmers markets and popping up in our own gardens, and then looking forward to enjoying it with recipes like this. So I've got some sample plates, and I'm going to go ahead and plate up some little tasters if everybody wants to come and try this elbow grease vinaigrette and get ready to make this hopefully at home for your fall kitchen. And while I plate all of this up, if anybody's got some questions, I would be happy to answer. I've got my hands all messy here.
So for those that don't know or don't make dressing at home, you would have added the oil in your black drink blender. You don't have...
You could use a blender. You could use, if I've got this all, I would puree it until everything was smooth, no more big chunks. I kind of like a little bit of chunks, because I want to get a little odd piece of sage or piece of garlic stuck to whatever I'm doing. But you would just puree that, and then slowly, that's what this little hole is for. You drizzle as the blender runs.
I use my Vitamin.
Yes.
She said the story.
Awesome. She did. I was going to be looking out for you guys. Let's see. Okay. I'm so messy today. All right.
Anyway, you did great.
Thank you.
So the sage, you use the culinary sage.
Yes, so that's the
White sage.
yeah, white sage is what we use in ceremony. That's what you would burn, for blessings, for cleansing. They've got this very similar aroma, but the flavor is a little bit different. And actually, hi! Thank you for coming!